It's 1972. 5 men are arrested after breaking into Washington's Watergate building, which is in a place called Foggy Bottom. Sorry. What would first appear like a botched burglary attempt draws the attention of a few skeptical journalists who see a breaking and entering of a Democratic office right around elections as a little bit fishy. After a series of investigations by a few intrepid journalists and the efforts of an FBI informant going by the codename Deep Throat, I'm sorry, I will do the review, I promise, I'm sorry. Watergate is a game specifically for 2 players. It puts those players in the shoes of the Nixon administration chasing re-election and the journalists attempting to out his dirty dealings. Even just from opening the box, this is a game that might seem quite intimidating to those who aren't particularly excited by historical themings, but fear not, dear reader, because this humble reporter is here to tell you that the Watergate conspiracy might just hold a bit more entertainment value than you'd expect, even if you don't know a single thing about the history. So let's start off with how the game plays. First things first, you'll need to pick a side in this intellectual conflict. The Nixon administration or the journalists, defense or attack. Whilst it might seem like the 2 sides of the board will be playing through the game in a similar fashion, there is a hint of asymmetry between your choices and namesake. Each player will be working to different goals and will have their own unique deck of cards that will help them reach those goals. The journalists will be spending their time seeking out informants and trying to build a case against the other player. They'll win immediately if they can pin 2 different informants in an unbroken chain of evidence to Nixon himself on the other side of the board. The administration will be trying to bide their time and gain momentum in an attempt to hold off the journalistic onslaught until Nixon's term is through. There's 2 sections of the board in which you'll be battling for scraps of information: the research track and the evidence board. Every turn, the research track is loaded with a momentum token, an initiative token, and 3 pieces of evidence for the 2 players to fight over. From turn to turn, these tokens will be shifting back and forth between player areas until they find their final resting spots at the end of the round. From there, it's as simple as assigning each token to the player whose side of the board it's sitting on. Anything on the 0 space is put back into the supply, unclaimed. If you manage to grab yourself one of these white tokens, then you'll have won the initiative next round, which comes with an extra card drawn at the start of the round and the benefit of having the first turn. Grab the red token and you've earned some momentum, which is especially important for Nixon, who needs to grab 5 of these tokens to win the game. If the journalist picks them up instead, they can fill their own little tracker, which won't win them the game, but will come with some special bonuses for reaching sets of 3, 4, and 5. Finally, there's the evidence tokens, the key struggle of the journalists, trying to put together a picture of the scandal and catch Nixon's administration red-handed. If you manage to grab some of these evidence tokens from the research track, you can place them down on the evidence board in any free slot, matching the color of the evidence that you just picked up. The more you place, the more evidence starts to connect to other shreds that you found previously, and before you know it, you might just have a case on your hands. If Nixon gets his hands on those pieces of evidence, though, he can place them in the same fashion, but face down, blocking a potential route for the journalist's investigation. The question now is, how do those tokens get moved? Well, at its heart, Watergate is a card game. As I mentioned previously, each player is going to be drawing from their own unique deck of cards, full of events and allies to utilize throughout the game. On their turn, each player must play 1 card from their hand, and then the opponent will respond in the same way. A round ends once both players have emptied their hands. The cards in your deck are pretty versatile, but they can also be quite fleeting if you're not careful. Every card has 2 uses, the value part and the action part. The value is simple enough. You can use the card to take any token on the research track and move it a number of spaces towards your end of the board. If it's an evidence token, it just has to match the color of the one pictured on your card. And if you've got a joker on your card, that means you can move any color. Once you've spent the value part of a card, it goes into your discard pile. And if you run out of cards at any point during the game, your discard pile is shuffled back into a new deck so that those cards you've already used will be available for you again at some point later in the game. The actions on the cards, though, are much more powerful and need to be timed well to be properly utilized. Events can swing around in your favor dramatically, allowing you to reach out, or in Nixon's case, scrub out, to potential informants, move multiple tokens at once, or maybe even remove a damning piece of evidence or thorny informational roadblock from the board. Once you've used an event card's action, though, it isn't placed in your discard pile, but instead removed from the game entirely, thinning down your deck and potentially removing future actions down the line. There are a few special cards that represent your allies and staff that can assist you as well. The newspaper editor can utilize their scrappy journalists, and Nixon can call on some co-conspirators to perform some powerful actions without their cards being removed from the game. Apart from some minor details that we'll touch on in a sec, that's pretty much all the rules. In fact, when you pick up the rulebook for the first time, you might think you're in for quite a read until you flick through the pages and realize that over half of the book is just historical text explaining the events as they took place and the background info on all the cards. This is, despite the subject matter, a pretty easy game to learn, and one that you can teach to a new player in not very much time at all. That's certainly not to Watergate's detriment, though. It's an elegant game rather than one that feels shallow or undeveloped, something that tries to cram a lot of theme and strategy into as few rules and components as possible. Two players who are new to gaming can have a pretty solid time with this, but once you start to peel away the layers of gloss to find the complexity hiding underneath, there's a surprising amount of depth to this simple card game. Take, for example, the informants that you'll be wrestling for control over throughout the game. Putting them on the board for both players is pretty straightforward. You play the relevant card and they're either placed face up or face down, depending on whether it was the journalist or Nixon who's securing their loyalty. If they're face up, they can count towards one of the two chains of evidence that the journalist needs to build in order to win the game. If they're face down, they're no longer available for the journalist to recruit. The natural reaction then is to try and play your informant cards to either grab their support as soon as possible so that you have as many possible avenues to winning the game as the journalist, or to block your opponent from having too many paths of victory when playing as Nixon. Problem is, these cards have the highest values in your entire deck, 3s and 4s rather than the massive 2s that you're used to from the other cards. If you play every single one of them, or even just a large amount of them as soon as they're drawn, you'll completely hamstring your deck for the rest of the game. If instead you try to bide your time and save your cards for later down the line, then you're allowing your opponent to claim in your stead. Ooh. Timing is an important skill in Watergate. Knowing the optimal time to use a certain event can bring you back from the brink of defeat or push you ahead right towards the end of the race. You'll be tempted to pull as many tokens as you can towards you at the start of each round, but all that work can be undone quickly if your opposition has been holding on to a secret weapon in the meantime. One of the tools at your disposal on the research track is one of those extra rules I said I'd be touching on later in the video. At both ends of the track, you'll notice that nothing can go further than 5. If at any point during your jostling you manage to move a token to the 5 space, you'll take it off the board and be able to place it instantly. This is a good way of ensuring that your opponent physically can't touch one of the tokens that you're counting on to make your plans work. As those tokens are placed instantly though, it can also be used to kick things out of order to your advantage. Normally when everything's assigned at the end of a round, you'll put down your momentum token first, then the journalist always gets priority over placing their evidence tokens, and Nixon follows suit. A tricksy journalist might send their tokens off the edge of the board so that they can snatch away a victory before Nixon manages to place his final momentum at the end of the round. In return, Nixon might do the same in order to block the one space the journalist was counting on to finish a link. Let's talk about theme for a second. If you're the kind of person who gets completely turned off by the idea of dour historical games and rulebooks full of black and white photographs and recommended reading, first of all, well done for sticking it out through this entire video, and I'm immensely proud of you. But second of all, don't let that deter you from what is a really fun game that stands independent of its subject matter. What seems like a fuddy-duddy retreading of political events plays like a scrappy young journalist, investigating and punching up at a corrupt system. Just the simple act of pinning your evidence tokens to this red string-laden corkboard is incredibly evocative. The Nixon player will see their hastily built defenses crumbling away and respond with cruel and deceitful tactics to beat the journalist back down. The power struggle is really inviting regardless of what it symbolizes. I could easily see this being rethemed as a Netrunner-style hacking game where the informants are replaced with server breaches and incriminating a politician is instead becoming breaking into a big megacorp servers. Maybe instead it could be a detective trying to pin witnesses to a nefarious serial killer, or a spy trying to establish a network of agents to infiltrate an enemy force's HQ. The history surrounding the game doesn't necessarily feel like required reading, but more supplementary lore. This, however, sparks a problem for the other camp. What if you're really interested in the Watergate scandal? It's a fascinating piece of history for those wanting to relive those moments, but as I said, it doesn't feel all that relevant to what you're actually doing in the game, to me anyway. The problem with historical games is that they tend to lean on the events of the story and then allow you to play those events as big, exciting moments, but they end up just feeling out of order and kind of irrelevant. The benefit of Watergate being a truly elegant and simple design becomes a problem when you're trying to recontextualize real-world events into moving tokens across a tracker. The game feels abstract, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but does feel like a missed opportunity when it could have leaned harder into the theme it chose, or in my humble opinion, picked a different and more exciting subject matter. That being said though, theme isn't everything. Watergate is still a great game that deserves our recommendation regardless. If you're looking to have a real battle of wits that doesn't require a million plastic chits and a comprehensive understanding of battle tactics and American law, then you should really give Watergate a go. I think the presentation is lovely, and it does sit you comfortably in that time period, enjoying the drama as the power of information ebbs and flows between both parties. I can't praise this little evidence board enough as well, because I really do want to see more games in the future use this idea and see how far they can take it. Just the idea of linking two things with little plastic chits seems really, really simple, but actually works really, really well. So thanks very much for watching our review of Watergate. If you did enjoy this video, there are plenty more like it, and Dicebreaker is fast becoming a great place to find out about new games and enjoy the tabletop hobby. If you'd like to come and join that journey with us, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. And if you click on that little bell next to it as well, you'll get notified every time we upload a new video. Speaking of new videos, there's a few at the bottom here that you can probably watch for yourself right now as well. And we'll be back very soon with some more stuff for you to enjoy. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.